So guys, I was going to go to the Aurora cruiser, or rather the cruiser Aurora, but instead I had a massive migraine. So I went and slept that off, and it's about 11 o'clock at night here. So I went to a 24-hour stolovaya, so a cafeteria. I got my plov, a French beefsteak, and my Olivier salad, and my beer. Not terribly expensive, only about 200 rubles, I think. And yeah, I'm going to eat this, maybe go for a little bit of a walk, and then go back to the flat. But tomorrow will be a better day. I think the Catherine Palace tomorrow, and if I've got time, the cruiser Aurora. Tips and tricks for surviving in Russia. The first one being, if you want to eat cheap, find a stolovaya. And a stolovaya is a Soviet-era cafe, well, more of a cafeteria, so you get your tray, and you get your food, and you line up, and it's pull it along, and then you pay. But the food's usually not too bad, and it's quite cheap. And plus, you can get beer, but then you can get beer pretty much anywhere here. But yeah, if you want to eat cheap, but you don't necessarily want to cook, stolovayas are the way to go. So that's tip number one. Tip number two is have an Australian accent, because people seem to like that, although I've found so far that people think that I'm from Germany. Tip number three, get a metro card in either Moscow or St. Petersburg. Now, I found that the metro system in St. Petersburg isn't as extensive as Moscow, but that's sort of to be expected. It's a good deal smaller. There are only about 4 million people here versus the 30 or so million that live in Moscow, or rather Moscow and the surrounding area, but metro cards, really, really good. Tip number four, further to tip three, the metro systems in the big cities are really, really fantastic. They usually run until about 2 in the morning, so unless you're really pissed, you can usually get home on time fairly quickly, and they still run every 2 minutes until 2 in the morning. Tip number five, make sure you do speak at least a little bit of Russian, because you want to make sure people don't screw you on getting your change back. Now, I haven't had that happen to me yet. I only had that happen to me once by accident, and they were very apologetic afterwards, but I have heard that if they hear you have a foreign accent, they might try and screw you over. Tip number six is, if you do get a taxi, or at least initially, use the Yandex app, because, you know, then that has their name and everything. It's like using Uber back home. Use the Yandex app and get Comfort Plus. It is a bit more expensive, but you're more likely to get people who speak at least a little bit of English, or they're more likely to be nicer to you because you're spending more. So I found a lot of the people I had for Yandex Comfort Plus drivers were really, really friendly. A lot of them from the Central Asian republics too, although they spoke without a trace of an accent when they did speak English. One of them was so nice that and so friendly that he actually asked me to invest in his tourism business, but that may have been some weird happenstance. Tip number 8 or 9, whichever it is. Cash is king in Russia. You can very much pay for things by card, but paying by cash, I just like it better. That's just my personal preference, but everywhere accepts cash. They're happy to take it. Only occasionally will they say, have you got something smaller? But usually a 1,000 ruble note doesn't go amiss. Tip number 9, learn the good areas of town. I basically don't go to the east of, or rather the east of Moscow, mostly because I was told that's not a good place to go, so I would usually stick around the west. St. Petersburg, I don't know yet. I mean, I'm staying in a really nice area right in the center, right near the Church of the Saviour, as you would have seen in previous videos. But yeah, just stay out of the bad areas, but that goes for anywhere. Tip number 10 is, if you're visiting famous places like I did with the Church of the Saviour, it pays to get the audio guide, because there will be, in the bigger places, stuff in English, but you'll miss out on quite a lot, so do get the audio guide if you go somewhere famous, if you can. This is one more for the linguists amongst you. If you meet a Russian and you want to practice Russian, do insist that they speak Russian to you, because the second they find out you speak English, they will try and speak English to you, which is fair enough, you know. But yeah, just make sure that you sort of insist that you want to speak Russian to them. I haven't had too many problems, but, you know, just in case. Tip number 12, I think it is, Google Translate is your friend, but don't rely on it too much. Like, maybe check a couple of definitions of the word first, because I found, for instance, that the word some and the word most and that kind of thing has 5 or 6 different words for it, all meaning different things in different contexts. So it is your friend, but it is a fair weather friend. There's a friend that you have to watch out for. Tip number 13, or whatever it is, if you do book flights within Russia, now I have had no problems whatsoever so far, do get a local to check if that airline's good. So I've flown with Ural Airlines and with Aeroflot. Now Aeroflot was the sort of Soviet-era state-sponsored one, and Ural Airlines was apparently the sort of their version of Tiger Air for a long time. But they're perfectly fine now. But like I say, the joke is that you fly internally in Russia if you want to know what it looks like to be inside a plane when it crashes. So make sure that you get a local to check that the airline's reputable. And tip, whatever number it is, if you are a beer drinker like me, if you want good beer, like good craft beer, you do have to look for it a little bit. But that's sort of the case with everywhere. Like, craft beer hasn't really taken off as much here as it has in the rest of the world, but it's getting there. The more you, like, as sort of vote with your wallet, as the capitalists like to say, the more we buy craft beer in Russia, the more craft beer will be made. So you have to look a little bit hard for it, but you can usually find it. Oh, and one more thing would be, you will find 24-hour stores pretty much anywhere. In St. Petersburg or in Moscow, I don't know about, like, smaller towns, not so much, but obviously in the big cities you'll get the 24-hour stores. They've got the words "produkty" above it, or one of the really common ones is called Dixie. So you find those and you'll be grand. The other thing is, don't drink the water. Now, that's not as big of an inconvenience as I thought it would be, because they sell water in huge bottles everywhere for dirt cheap. You'll spend like $2 for 5 liters of water. Like, not even $2, something like 83 rubles if you get the right prices. But yeah, so getting water, not as big of an issue as I thought it would be. Whatever number tip this is, also, if you ever need the gents and you're not like in a restaurant or something, make sure you've got maybe about 30 rubles to 50 rubles on hand in cash, so that you can pay to use the toilets. Like I discovered in my previous trip to Germany and all the rest, paying to use the gents here is quite a common thing. Not in like restaurants and things, but like, say you go to a shopping mall or whatever, there'll usually be a little old lady sitting there waiting for you to give her money. And your heart goes out to her, but it's important work and we need public restrooms. So always remember, have maybe about 50 rubles on hand if you ever need to use the gents, if you're ever caught out. And it always pays to read the checks that you get at restaurants. Some places include the 10% tip, some places don't. I usually try to do 15, but now if the thing says 10%, I'll only do 10% because, I'm not made of money. But yeah, just check to make sure about that, because you don't have to tip here, but the pay that people make here is so crap that, you're a dick if you don't, much like if you go to America and you don't tip, thank you, Mr. Pink, but you're still a dick. But yeah, so always make sure to check the checks and leave a tip if you can, because usually these people are making nothing. So that's just a few tips and tricks if you ever come to Russia. You probably won't, but if you do, just follow those simple rules and you'll be okay. So I guess just remember, stay dandy.